Welcome to the Unraveling Shaltazar podcast. Hello, Jeffrey.
Hello, Mark. How are you today?
Well, you know how I am. We were just talking about it. I'm
a loaded question, wasn't it? Loaded question.
Yeah. It's funny when you ask it. The first, when someone asks you that question, your first inclination is, "Oh, I'm great. Everything's good." But I'm kind of feeling I'm feeling the low and slow and actually physical fatigue today. So I haven't been. Been kind of pushing, burning the candle at both ends in the middle, and I'm tired, and there's been a lot going on, a lot of emotional things going on, which kind of ties into the message we're going to talk about today, coincidentally.
Right. Yeah, and I would have to say, although I don't have as much going on in my life, I concur. I'm having trouble getting out of bed in the morning. I am, tired in the middle of the day. We just came off a long weekend here in Canada. Our May long weekend, and weather was great, and it was like, wow, how come I don't have more energy? So, and of course there is a tomorrow there is a lunar eclipse, a full moon, and you know my belief in the moon energy. So, and it was kind of nice to hear that you're kind of feeling what I'm feeling. I encourage people, ask other people how they're feeling, and often you'll get some feedback to make you feel more at ease, the fact that what you're going through, you're not alone. And I hear you. When someone asks me how I am, I try to distinguish between okay means I'm not doing very well, and yeah, everything is great. So I try not to always do the great, and I say either fine or okay. And if you happen to be one of the people that asked me the question and I come back with fine or okay, then know that Jeffrey must be going through something. So
Sure.
The message you picked today was just perfect for me, and I'm glad you did.
Yeah. I was telling you, based on a bunch of things going on in my life, a lot of emotions surfacing the past few days, and I just kind of stumbled across this one. It's called Embracing the Spectrum of Emotions. I believe you said it was one of the older ones, but very relevant, very timely, as they all are, and really helpful when it comes to kind of trying to understand what, I think, what your emotions are telling you or trying to tell you.
Right. Yeah. And it's interesting. I was sharing with you before we got on how this message has really become a cornerstone of my belief system around emotions and what I teach to other people. It's really a foundational piece because growing up, I was taught that there are good and bad emotions, and you're supposed to eliminate the bad emotions and always strive for the good emotions, and so that caused me a lot of consternation. That caused me a lot of stress, because if I was feeling anxious, if I was feeling angry, that was a bad thing, and you had to get rid of it. And this teaching from Shaltazar has really changed my life, because I have come to accept those emotions, and even the line in there that, and Shaltazar repeats it often, that emotions are truth, or feelings are truth. I do have difficulty accepting that every once in a while, when we're feeling down and a bit uncomfortable. You sort of say, how can that be truth, right?
Right. Last episode we talked about, I think it was last episode, we talked about two sides of the same coin, I believe, or
a couple episodes ago. Yeah.
Okay. Well, and so to me, this kind of echoes some of those same ideas, because they're saying that, like, we've all been sort of programmed by society, I guess, to only look for or only appreciate the good feeling emotions, right? The positive emotions, if we want to label them as such. And we want to feel that way all the time. We don't want to, we don't necessarily want to experience the darker side or the downside or the negative emotions.
Well,
that's what it's all about.
And it's interesting you say that, because over the years I've had clients, especially men, because as men we tend to have shut down but really disconnected from our feelings and our emotions. Mm-hmm. And these guys would say to me, well, how do I feel? And, I would, in a smart-ass kind of way, say, well, stop thinking. Mm-hmm. Because Shaltazar has taught me that the feelings are there, it's just the mind. And in this message, it does talk about how we use the mind to get us out of or disconnect from those uncomfortable feelings. And I think, again, this message, if anybody ever coached with me, they would say, oh, this is where he got all this from. Mm-hmm. So it was really, really packed with a lot of the philosophies and beliefs I have about emotions. And so the idea that we always feel we're just disconnected from them is a little bit different than we're taught, because often we're taught that we don't have feelings, right? That we don't have these feelings, right? But Shaltazar is saying you always do. It is that disconnection, and they're saying because at a young age we don't know how to handle the unpleasant, lower, slower, uncomfortable feelings, we make an unconscious deal with our mind to protect ourselves from that uncomfortable feeling. And so whenever something uncomfortable comes up, you and I were talking before about an incident where maybe guilt was coming up, and you realize that it just keeps repeating itself, and you keep beating yourself up for something that you think you should have done, instead of allowing that guilt to come up and finding the truth in it. One of the things that I've come to realize is that those lower and slower, those uncomfortable feelings are very much the equivalent of what I would say is a fever for the body. The fever is very unpleasant, very uncomfortable, but the fever is telling you that the body is fighting an infection. Mm-hmm. And so those lower and slower feelings are really the equivalent of the fever with the physical body. They're just telling you that your emotional body is out of whack, that healing needs to occur.
Yeah. That's a really good analogy. It's even in terms of the fever raising your temperature, right? Because the same thing, you get that same sort of a feeling when you've got this unpleasant feeling rising up in you. It kind of your face turns red or whatever. You kind of feel it physically as well as emotionally.
Right. You get the flushes, you get the shivers. Right. Think about all of the things that you get when your body is out of homeostasis, when you're being warned that something's not functioning the way it should. Mm-hmm. Well, what if those lower and slower emotions were exactly that? Okay, if you disconnect from them, you're missing out on that, right? It would be like you're not aware of your body, you're not aware of the shivers, you're not aware of the sweats, you're not aware of a headache, right? So if you're not aware of those things, then your body is trying to talk to you and you're not listening. Well, what if it was the same with emotions? What if those lower and slower emotions is your emotional body trying to talk to you, to tell you something's out of whack here, something's out of alignment, there's an inner conflict, and you miss it, which, by the way, is what the majority of people on the planet do. Again, we talk about that conditioning. Certainly as a man, I was taught that, we're supposed to think. The person with the most thoughts wins, right? You're supposed to be intelligent. You're not supposed to be this feeling person. And so, therefore, you're missing out on your emotional body telling you something's out of whack.
Right, yeah. It says it right here. It says these feelings serve a purpose, a very important purpose. By cutting yourself off from them, by denying them, you miss out on an important part of life. The answer is to stay and face up to life, all of life, and to do so, you must learn to accept the lower and slower uncomfortable feelings. So, yeah,
right.
It's but it just doesn't. It's counterintuitive, right? Because and what Abraham's always saying, there's nothing more important than to feel good.
Right.
So if I'm not feeling good, then I'm doing something wrong, right?
Right. Right. But Abraham also, yes, I hear you. But Abraham also has their scale of emotions, and they always say try to reach for the best feeling emotion. Well, in order to do that, they're recognizing, they're teaching us to recognize that we're in the basement. We're in the basement of that hierarchy. We're in depression. We're in despondency. We're in hopelessness, right? And I think when they say, and I can't speak for Esther Hicks, but I think when Abraham is saying reach for a higher feeling emotion, they're saying find out the cause of that misalignment that is causing the anger, the frustration, the anxiety, the despondency, and work towards resolving it so that you can move to a higher vibrating emotion. And Shaltazar just goes, I think, a little bit farther. What they're saying is you're not going to work that out by disconnecting from those feelings, because your feelings are your thermometer, they're your barometer, they're the ones that measure. So if you've disconnected from them, how are you really going to know when you're in the lower and slower and when you're slowly climbing out? I had a bout of lower and slower this weekend, and I will tell you, which is really, I think, miraculous. Thank you for choosing this message, embracing the full spectrum of your emotions. Just listening to it allowed me to shift. And I tried to figure out, well, how come I was feeling better after I listened to this 11-minute message than before? And what popped into my mind was Shaltazar gave me permission to be okay with what I was feeling. And the minute I was okay with it, it seemed to disappear. The minute I gave myself permission, I'm repeating myself because it's an important insight for me. The minute I gave myself permission to be okay, and when I was finished, I simply said, I'm okay with feeling, and then I filled in the blank, right? I'm okay. I give myself permission to feel this, and then it was gone. Yeah. Which is kind of interesting.
It's almost like a capacitor discharging a flash bulb or something. It's like it builds up this charge, and if you don't follow that process to diffuse it, or to let it, to let the energy, dissipate, then you hold it inside yourself and then it eats you, right?
Yeah, another example is water, a valve, right? You get a buildup in the garden hose, right?
Right.
And if you've got that garden hose on full blast, you will notice, right? Depending on the thickness of that hose, you'll notice a bulge, right? Right? The hose starts to bulge, and then if you take your, whatever's blocking the flow, if you open it up, it goes, and then you're back in normal flow. And this is reminding me of the work that the late Debbie Ford did, and also I think Deepak Chopra in shadow work. It's often referred to as shadow work. And people learn to love the shadow. The book I'm referring to of Debbie Ford's was, I believe it was called The Light Side of Dark Chasers. And she talked about the fact that people that didn't deal with these unpleasant, lower, slower emotions, they would build up and explode like a volcano. So the person that has an angry outburst is someone that has most likely been stifling that anger for years and years. And then all of a sudden it blows up. And so the book was really a great book, and it also helped me understand this shadow work.
It seems so simple too at the same time, right? It's not, it kind of comes down to, patience, I think, patience for yourself and how you're feeling, and patience for realizing that other people are feeling the same way, or feeling their feelings, and not judging it as good or bad or right or wrong. It is what it is, if that makes sense.
It makes 100% sense, but I want to go back, because I think you're onto something. You made the comment, the point, it seems so simple. Well, it does. And so what is it? What is it that is preventing the bulk of humanity from not doing that which seems so simple? I mean, here it is, we're having this conversation. Anybody that's listening, I would think that they would agree with us. This makes sense, right? But yet it's not something we do. So what is it? What's that issue that's blocking us?
Yeah, well, you mentioned the word attachment earlier, and I shared this with you, but I was listening to an Anthony DeMello recording about attachment, and it seems like attachment kind of is the root source of all suffering. In fact, a couple of weeks after I listened to that Anthony DeMello recording, I read a quote from somebody that Buddha said that actually, that attachment is the root of all suffering. And it seems like the only explanation is that we become so attached to either our what do they call it, our disconnection from our emotions. We become attached to that way of reacting or living or dealing with our emotions, and we become attached to our worldview in that respect. Perhaps that if we can't let those things go, then we can't move beyond it, and we become, we're constantly defending ourselves from everybody else's worldview and everybody else who's willing to be to surrender to it and detach from it. I don't know.
No, it makes sense. It makes total sense. Tony Robbins, I remember a quote from him that we are attracted to pleasure and we are deterred from pain. Well, if we stop and think about it at a young age, okay, so I think that there are two major reasons that we do not see the simplicity in this. The first one is that we have made lower and slower feelings pain. So from a young age, you cry, your parents tell you don't cry, don't be a baby, all of those things. Don't be angry, don't be this, don't be that, right? Suck it up and be strong, and all of those. It would be, I'm sure if people sort of went back to as far back as you can remember, you would realize you were inundated with conditioned beliefs that told you that those lower and slower feelings are pain and they're to be avoided at all costs. So based on what you're talking about attachment, we are being taught run for the hills. If that unpleasant feeling comes up, you don't want to be attached to it, right? I've coached many people when we try to drain the swamp and we get into those unexpressed emotions. I remember when I started to do it, the shaman that I went to said that my gut area was like a tar field, and it's easy to think of when you start going into those suppressed, unexpressed emotions that you're going to be you're going to be a mess. You're going to be sad. You're going to cry every day. Well, that's not true. So I think that's the one part of it. The other part is, well, what are we attached to? We're attached to gratification. Everything in life, whether no matter what it is, just think about it. Okay, think about we were talking about sports before, and why are we attracted to sports? Because we want our team to win, and if our team wins, we feel euphoric, we feel happy. We buy things to make ourselves feel good. We dress a certain way to make ourselves feel good. Most of what we're doing in life is we are trying to attach ourselves to things that we think will make us feel good, and we are trying to stay away from or be detached from anything that makes us feel unpleasant. Well, therefore, what we've done is we've taken the simplicity of what we're saying out, because we've all conditioned that we need to there's an entitlement to find the feel-good feelings, and there's a feeling of fear that if you go into the lower and slower. So I think the answer to seeing it as being simple is to let go of our attachment to the feel-good things and let go of our fear of the not feel-good things, and realize, and that's what Shaltazar is trying to say, that if we're going to accept the wholeness of life, you have to accept the unpleasant as well as the pleasant. They talk about love that which you do not like. And to love doesn't necessarily mean to like. So they're saying, you're never going to like those unpleasant emotions, but learn to accept them. And that's what this message did for me today. It allowed me to accept how I was feeling so I could move on.
Exactly. Yeah. We're about out of time, but I'll kind of end with this quote from the message. Learn to accept it. Learn to love it, even if you don't like it. Know that it is you, a part of you, and don't run away from it.
Which is accept your shadow. Love the parts of you do not like.
There we go.
Thank you for choosing this one, Mark, and thank you for the healing, because by you choosing it, it allowed me to heal a little bit, to get out of my lower and slower, and I think it did for you as well. I hope it does for the listeners.
Same. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Love and light to everyone.
If you have any questions about the Master Teachings of Shaltazar, we invite you to submit them to Jeffrey@jeffreyeisen.com, and we will make your question the topic of a future episode.